But the thing is this, we all ask for a lot. If I analyze my motives, I analyze what I would expect from you in a perfect world, in the end, all those little things can add up to the point where I'm asking you for a lot. Especially if I'm constantly telling you you're not meeting my expectations and you're not doing it well enough and you do this wrong and do that wrong, then all of a sudden I am asking a lot.
That could be really discouraging too, and it can really hurt the relationship. And I think we don't necessarily agree on what is a reasonable expectation.
In all of the good times and even the trials, through tears and through laughter, yeah, I know that I'll smile when I think of you, smile for the things you do, smile. God gave me you, you are the reason I smile, yeah.
This is Behind Our Smiles
Pursuing connection,
and finding joy.
even in the struggle. Welcome back to another episode of the Behind Our Smiles Marriage Podcast. We are Joe and Tara Buchanan.
Yeah, we're so glad that you're here, and we love hearing from you about what makes you smile about your husband or wife. And today it is Tyler sharing about his wife, Samantha. He says that what makes him smile about Samantha is the drive for our family and not expecting much, such as pampering, etc. Her love for our son, how gorgeous she looks, and she's always easy on the eyes. Well, Tyler, thank you, and would love to hear from you. What makes you smile about your husband or wife? You can share today. It can be something really quick, a sentence, a bullet point, or a paragraph, whatever you want.
Write us a story.
Tara? Yeah, write us a full book. Tara, T-A-R-A, at BehindOurSmiles.com.
We don't ask for much.
Yeah.
We just want a message.
And that's exactly what he said in here, is that she doesn't expect much as far as pampering. And kind of made me think about this episode. Obviously, I don't ask for much. And we had this couple that was in a part of our marriage group. And that phrase actually came up when we were working with these couples. And it just kind of made us think a little bit about this idea that, whoa, even though you and I don't, like, that's not a phrase that's in our marriage, it's something as humans that we all struggle with.
Yes, this idea that these expectations are the things that we want the world to be. You know, we think about the world that we're in, and this is the way the world should work. And we assume that the way we want the world is doable, and we're not asking for much. But for some reason, you know, as we heard that and I've said that, I'm like, but what's the problem with that phrase? Like, what is it? Because I think it does sneak its way into our marriage by assuming that, hey, what I'm asking of you is really low. But then when it goes the other way and you're asking it of me, that's that's way too much to ask. Right. So
Right.
I think we have these conversations back and forth with our family, with our kids, to go, is what we're asking for reasonable? I don't know.
Well, and I think the number one source of conflict is unmet expectations, right? And so we have to kind of go back to there to go, what are the standard expectations and what would generate a phrase like, I don't ask for much.
Right. And so part of this is like not just what we expect, but where those expectations come from, especially you're talking about everyday life and the way things should be done. So obviously most of those things come from not just our personal desires, but the way we've been raised. So I think if we think about our family life, the way we're raised, this is how it's always done. This is what people do. And this is the way the world should work. And then we get married and you're going, we don't do it that way. I wasn't raised doing it that way. I never thought that was important. So you're asking way too much to like say this has to be done this way. But I'm going over here like, I'm not asking for much. Right. And I think, you know, to be honest with you, I think I've used this phrase more often with our kids. Because sometimes, like, with the issues they've had and keeping the house together, that phrase has probably popped out of my mouth in a different fashion. Guys, like, don't ask for much, you know? I'm like, I've lowered my bar as low as it can go. Please, you know? But I think, would you say for you too, Joe, with the things that you ask for of me, how is that your past shape for what you say is equivalent, you know, acceptable to ask for?
Right. Well, yes, I think.
You ask of me?
Yeah.
It's a hard question.
I think, you know, my brain's going 100 different places because I think also we expect each other to read our minds at times too. And so there is an expectation that you may not even be aware of. But I think, like, for instance, clean dishes is a pretty easy expectation. And so when we're unloading the dishwasher, if we just look at the dish and if it's not clean, we put it
So I have a question
back,
for you.
or we leave it in the dishwasher.
So you could have had that, not that expectation, but that, hey, this is reasonable to ask of somebody else. And that wasn't because you were raised by a neat Nick mother.
No.
Right? So it's
Right.
opposite.
Right.
Yeah, you were.
I'm not even sure I had dishes at times. But I don't like eating off dirty dishes. I don't know if that
don't ask
came
for
from
much.
my childhood or that's something that I just as a human don't want to do. So I don't ask for much. I just want
Right.
my dishes to be clean.
And so from my perspective, I'm going, okay, that's reasonable to ask. But also, if I'm washing 100 dishes in a day or seeing the transfer of dishes in the dishwasher and the thing, I can't catch every single one. Once in a while, there's going to be a dish that just, the little Fruity Pebble did not get off the dish all the way or whatever was stuck on there. And there will be a dish that has something from the last load that did not get washed off. I'm not asking for much. I just know that sometimes that's going to slip through.
Right. And so I never really used that
No,
phrase.
but-
It wasn't one of my phrases, but it was my behavior.
That's how I felt.
Because I would
Right.
pull a spoon out of the drawer and I would put it in the sink. I'd pull another spoon, and if it was dirty, I'd put it in the sink. But a third one, I'm basically throwing the spoon into the sink because I'm like,
I don't ask
basically, I'm
for-
saying I don't ask for much. I just want a clean spoon.
And see, I'm going like, I've washed 100 spoons today. Can someone help pitch in towards this, or can this
Yes.
happen better? So I don't ask for much. But the reason I think that phrase was hurtful to anybody, I've even in situations outside of our marriage, or when I've heard you communicate something like this, I think the reason it's so hurtful is this idea that I failed.
Right.
And the kids, I was saying, I lowered the bar. I lowered the bar so low, and you can't even pass that, right? And I know, I don't mean that to be hurtful, but I know I've said that before. I'm like, listen, I am not a neat Nick by any stretch. You know, I have my own messes that I make. So I'm like, it's okay, guys. Everything can be all over the place. I just want like this one corner that can be clean, right? I just want one corner. I'm not asking for much. Take over the whole house. But when you communicate that to me, it's like you're failing. I have this bar and you can't meet it. And when I communicate that to you or to me, is that how you sense it to me? If I say to you, honey, I'm not asking for much, just do this. And it's like, you can't do it.
Well, again, it's this idea of like when you give me that posture, maybe without the words, but that's the posture, I can get offended by that. I can be like, well, you are asking for too much.
So another issue that we've talked about a few times is, again, I don't ask for much. The dirty clothes can go on a chair. They don't have to be hung up. They don't have to be folded on a chair. And then the clothes don't make it from the floor to the chair. I don't ask for much.
Okay, so this is really a great conversation because years ago they couldn't even be on the chair.
And
so
I lowered my bar. I lowered the bar.
think I have succeeded because I have behaved in such a way that now the chair is acceptable. So
We recently read about the we call it the laundry purgatory.
Yeah,
It's like they're not clean, they're not dirty, they're just waiting
yes,
to be used again. But we've been better at communicating that better. So like we come to that, okay, so I say, I don't ask for much. It's my bedroom. I don't want clothes on the floor. Now, are my clothes on the bathroom floor? Yeah, my clothes are on the bathroom floor. That's my prerogative. And my clothes are occasionally on the closet floor. But my decision, my standard is not on the floor and walk in the door. Like they could be on the floor in your closet. They could be on the floor in the bathroom. But I don't ask for much. Is that too much to ask? Why is it too much to ask?
well, because I do all of my normal
this
clothes
is live. Justify
I
why it's
do-
asking too much.
dispose or put away correctly. It's just a t-shirt here or a pair of shorts here or whatever that
It's
I
not too much, but I don't ask for much.
So, but I'll keep that in mind.
I just want to know, like, is that
Yeah.
a reasonable expectation to say,
Yes, it's a reasonable
okay,
expectation.
I don't ask for much. I just want the clothes on the chair.
But you know what? When I'm picking the clothes up, I'm like, she asked for so much.
Well, there is an element, and I think about things on the floor that have bothered me. And like for me, it's like the shoes too. Like we've had a lot of kids in the house and their shoes are big and the shoes are everywhere. And I'm like, my standard is just put them along the wall. They don't have to be on a rack. They don't have to be in a closet. Just put them towards the wall so they're not middle of the floor where I trip on them. I don't ask for much. And so sometimes I come home like, is there a reason the shoes are in the middle of the floor? Like just put them by a wall. I will not complain. Is that asking too much?
It's not, in theory,
But
because you're asking the question publicly. No, I don't think it's too much.
so it's just kind of going through those things, and this is my standard. So I think over the years, though, I don't want to communicate that you are not good enough. But I think it's okay to communicate that, hey, I like my home better when I don't trip on the shoes on the floor, or I don't like walking on clothes on the floor.
That's reasonable expectation.
It's a reasonable expectation. So it's the communicating a reasonable expectation. So you raise reasonable, you don't feel like meeting it. Is that what you're saying?
No, and I think I do meet it sometimes. And it's not because I don't want to meet the expectation. Okay. It's because I'm not thinking about it.
Yes, it's bending over. Mm-hmm. So it's the shoes and the clothes.
But let me
bending
ask you a
over
question.
is a lot of
How
work.
long does it take you to move the pair of shoes
It's bending over. Yes, I don't like bending over. I realize that. Anything that requires me to bend over and pick something up.
What if my expectation was for Tara to move my shoes? I'm not asking for much. I'd just like you to move my shoes.
You want to walk in the door, just fling your shirt wherever, and just go about your merry day. You're not asking for much. Like, can a man just fling his shirt and go about his day?
Right. Shoes. Yeah, just fling my shoes.
So I thought about that too. I'm like, hey, if that's what he's asking for, say, hey, at the end of the day, I want to fling my clothes where they end up. That brings me great joy. And it brings my heart warm feelings to just fling my clothes anywhere. I don't ask for much. I go, well, the man doesn't ask for much.
Right. So I think the anecdote to this is just clear. What did I say? Yeah. Okay. Yes. That.
This last episode.
I don't ask for much. Don't correct me. I don't ask for much.
An anecdote is a story. Anyway, yes. Tell me the anecdote.
Is clear communication. I think that's really where it's at, is really talking through why is it important to you? Because once I understand that it's important to you to not have your shoes, and basically I don't want to end up in the ER, trip over the shoes, or the clutter adds stress to my day, then I don't want to contribute to that. So then I can remember, okay, I'll move the shoes over.
Well, again, in the situation we set with the clothes, I think that's where I've come around to going, listen, I don't ask for much, but then I go, there's a lot of areas where Joe does not ask for much, and yet I still do not like meeting your standard. I'm like, listen, I know he's asking this of me. I don't like it. So you're a big one on the doors being closed and locked
at night, when we go
or
to
in
bed.
general. In general.
Oh no, I do. Like, I've read way too many stories, and we live in a very safe neighborhood. There's nothing wrong there, but I do when we're in the house, not looking at the doors. I like to know that they're closed and locked.
So you don't ask for much.
I don't ask for much. I just want the doors closed and locked.
And for me, I'm like, I don't ask for much. I just like to have the door open. Because how much work it is. But then I think, okay, there's these standards that you have. I go, that just does not matter to me that much. It does not matter to me as much. So I'm like, I don't want to do it. So again, if I've opened the drawer and one of the spoons are dirty, I'm like, it doesn't bother me. I throw the sink and wash it again. And you're like, oh, but it should be, I don't ask for much, So I think when you look at it from both point of view and to ask your spouse, okay, what are those areas that they're asking you for? You're going, that's too much. I don't want to come to your standard. I don't agree with it.
And many times, I know we've noticed this in our own marriage. Many times, I can start to think that everything is an unreasonable expectation.
Yes.
I can begin to think that Tara's whole life is, I don't ask for much.
Yes.
Really, when we begin to talk through the expectation side of it, we begin to realize it's just one or two areas, really, right? It's not everything. There are many things that Tara does that I never would ever even say, I don't ask for much. It's just, it is what it is. But once we begin to understand, okay, this is important to you, this is important to you, and I'll give the doors as a great example. I want the doors locked because I want you to be safe. I want Tara and the kids to be safe. And once she begins to understand that when the doors are locked, I'm more relaxed. I feel safer. Then you make an adjustment and say, yeah, I can lock the door.
It's not too much to ask.
Right. I'm not asking much. And the same is on my end of going, man, she doesn't want to trip over my clothes. She doesn't want to trip over my shoes. So maybe I can make that adjustment and I'm
trying to limit how much laundry there is even to do. I'm like, okay, if it gets hung up, it can get worn again. If it gets in the hamper, it'll get washed. If it's in laundry purgatory, then it just sits there and then it's too much. I'm not asking for much. But the thing is this, we all ask for a lot. I think if I analyze my motives and analyze what I would expect from you in a perfect world, in the end, all those little things can add up to the point where I'm asking you for a lot, especially if I'm constantly telling you you're not meeting my expectations and you're not doing it well enough and you do this wrong and do that wrong. Then all of a sudden I am asking a lot.
That could be really discouraging too. And it can really hurt the relationship. And I think we don't necessarily agree on what is a reasonable expectation. Like what is reasonable to you may not be reasonable to me.
And I think over time, that's where we have those conversations. But I think those conversations are never going to be productive if you don't coat them in grace, right? If we're just fighting to say, it's unreasonable for you to expect me to always put my shirt on their thing. I cannot do it. And I'm going, well, it's unreasonable for you ever to not do that. And if we're just going to argue that, then we will never, ever accomplish that. I will continually and always be disappointed in you and letting you know it. And you will continually not care if you're disappointing me, right? Because what's the point? If you know you're always going to disappoint me, then at some point you stop caring. You're going, well, I'll throw all of my clothes on the floor and she can just deal with it. But if we come to that point with grace and to say, okay, you know what? Whether or not I'm asking for much, not doesn't matter, right? Is this reasonable? How does my husband feel about this expectation? How does she feel about it? How does my wife feel about this expectation? Is this something we can work through together to say, here's what's important to me? And then whatever you're asking for, even if it isn't much, I can say, okay, I'm willing to step towards you and I'll work on that. I may never quite reach your expectation though. I'm sorry.
And I think part of it is understanding why, again, we go back and we said that earlier. And yes, you may not, depending on where the expectation is and depending on what's driving that expectation, it may not be humanly possible in some time, some situations to execute that well.
I really enjoy being able to please you in that way too, because when I think the times where I felt like you were asking, you kept saying I'm not asking for much, or just not saying that directly, but feeling like I couldn't meet your standard, whatever you wanted from me or wasn't good enough. It didn't motivate me as well to want to please you or want to even meet you halfway. Versus when I know you're giving me grace for that, then I go, you know what? This means a lot to my husband. I will take a step forward and I'll work on that. Okay, honey, I'll work on locking the doors more. I'll work on checking the spoons before. I'll work on the different little things. Like one of the things you ask for is keeping track of money. You're really good about that.
No, like keeping track of money. Let's just talk about a ledger.
Yes, keeping track of money.
It's not like money is like all over the house.
Sometimes there is though. Sometimes we find a 20 in the counter. Like, whose is this? And we don't know. And
no, especially as the kids, they start doing side jobs around the neighborhood and stuff, and just keeping track of the ledger.
Yes, we're like, okay, my son gave me $100 from this job, and did you write that down? What day was that? I'm like, I forgot to write it down. Well, did we write it down? Did we deposit it? I'm like, I forgot. I don't know. And you're like, honey, I don't ask for much. You don't say that, but like, you got to write it down.
We got to
when
make
there's a money transaction, we got to write down the transaction. And again, I go, that's fair to ask. I'm okay with that. But then on the flip side, to go, Joe, I will always struggle a bit with remembering to write those things down. I just will. And I know in my mind, okay, Joe really wants me to write these things down so I don't lose track of transactions, and just make sure you write this down, write that down. And I'm going, but I can't do it. It's hard for me and I forget. And I'm more likely to want to please you in that area and say, okay, I'll work on writing the transactions down. I'll note the date and the time and who gave me what money for what. If I know there's grace there, versus if I know, oh great, whatever I do, I'm going to fail. And he's going to be mad.
Our kids have learned that. And it's really cool because before Tara can even write it down, I'll get a text from one of my kids. I owe you $50 or whatever. Mom gave me $50, or I gave mom 50, whatever the case is. So then I can help.
Well, some of that was a level of like finding a better system, because you'll say, honey, I don't ask for much. Just do this way. I don't know how many times you've said that to me. Just this.
Just do it this way.
I'm like, that is not easy for me. That may be easier for you, but you're asking me to do too much. That is expecting too much, versus saying, okay, this is the desired outcome. This is what you want. You want a ledger. You want your finances accounted for so you know where the dollars are going and coming. That's a fair desire. Okay, how can we get Tara's brain to help you get to that desire? So sometimes I do like right away, instead of writing it down, I might just go, I'll text you really quickly. Oh, so-and-so just did this. That's where that money came from. So I think when we have a situation like that, to go, here's what my husband or wife wants. How could I help him meet this goal? Even if I know I can't do it perfectly, and I may never meet your standard exactly right. I'm not good at writing money down. That's your department.
But that's okay.
keeping everything.
It's okay. And the kids now know. So that it makes it really easy. But no, it's also in the kids' interaction stuff, I don't want them to get cheated in some way. So I always want to make sure that we're being fair with them. But it's also when people outside our household, we exchange money for whatever reason, that I want to make sure that I'm staying on top of that, and not necessarily if they owe me, but more if I owe them.
Again,
I don't want them
full
waiting.
disclosure. I'm not good with numbers. I'm like, I do the words, Joe, you do the numbers.
That's true.
So I just know, but I think in these conversations of not asking for much, I'm able to tell you, this is difficult for me. Keeping track of the numbers, it just does not flow with me. So I'm never going to do it as well as you are. I will try my best to help you. And I'll tell you when there's money flowing in and out, or where this $20 bill came from, best of my memory. But to be honest, to say, we are going to have strengths and weaknesses. So there's some things you ask for that are easy for you. And that's why you say, I don't ask for much. But I'm like, for me, that's really difficult.
That's a really good point. When I have the posture of I don't ask for much, it's because in my mind, what I'm asking for would be easy for me. But for whatever reason, I don't want to do it. So I'm asking you to do it.
Yeah.
I'm expecting you to do it.
Well,
and
no,
I
but
don't
you're
ask for
expecting that
much.
it'll be easy for me.
Yeah.
Like for me, this would be easy. And
But
I think
also, I don't want to do it.
Yeah.
So I'm expecting you to do it. But I think back to what you were saying earlier, Tara, is so important. And that's the grace card. To be able to extend grace right away, to be able to hear clearly, to be able to say, okay, you had 4 kids pulling at you all day. You swept the floor 13 times. You've done this. You have this. All of this is going on. If I find a dirty spoon in the drawer because when you emptied the dishwasher, it didn't quite get it. I mean, why should that be your problem? That I should just deal with that. That shouldn't be. I can look at that and go, okay, that's probably not a reasonable expectation at this juncture of.
Well, if my heart posture towards you is always saying, I don't ask for much, and that's that's the filter that I'm looking at you through. I'm also missing the gratitude piece, which is going, you know what? He does more than I ask him for sometimes, and he over delivers in this department. And sure, I could spend a podcast telling you how many clothes you left on the floor over the years, right? Or I can go, but dude, he's killing it here, here, and here. And when I go to buy those clothes, there's always money in the account because he keeps his numbers straight. And I know that we're not going to overdraft things. And I know that I'll be able to do this and that. So I think if constantly looking at the things where you're not lining up to my standards, I'm missing the gratitude piece to say, where is he killing it? Where am I grateful that he is not just meeting the bar, but surpassing it? And when I know for me, tell me, Tara, this is where you're killing it. This is where you've blown my expectations. Like I was not expecting this much. And then I'm like, okay, that motivates me to be a better wife than if I'm constantly being told, here's where you're not meeting the bar.
No, and that's human nature. And I think human nature is also to focus on, you can have 85% really, really good and 15% struggle. And we tend to focus on that 15%, but you're exactly right. If we can get our eyes off the struggle and onto all that is going well and be grateful for all that is going well, then all of a sudden, a dirty spoon, what the heck? That doesn't bother me at all.
Other things kind of get you.
And I don't ask for much.
I don't ask for much. We always think about it is a prideful statement. It's like, and again, prideful statement that we have used 100%. But I think it's a great thing for us to think about in what areas of my life am I assuming that I'm the one asking for less and everyone else should bow to that, versus saying, how can I, ask less of others
and serve.
Right. And serve others and say, how can I give more versus what I'm not getting? So anyway, that's the phrase that we've been rolling around in our heads lately. We don't ask for much. We ask for people.
Yeah,
we ask for people. We ask them for rating and review. We don't ask for much. I mean, how hard is it
to do a 5-star rating?
I think it's a realistic expectation, but you know what? As we mentioned before, sometimes things that are really easy are still really hard to do.
Yes, that's absolutely right.
And there's grace. So if you are having one of those days and you don't have time,
we understand.
We understand. We don't ask for much, but we understand.
We would love to hear from you, though. What makes you smile about your husband or wife? And if you have thoughts about the things that we discuss, we would love to hear from you. If you have thoughts about things you'd love to see us discuss, you can let us know that as well. Tara, T-A-R-A at BehindOurSmiles.com. Thank you so much for hanging out with us and listening. We're always grateful, and we'll see you again next week.
Behind Our Smiles is a Wow God production, a ministry of the University of Northwestern St. Paul. Discover more at wowgod.com.